Previously, we discussed gunshot acoustics and other aspects of the Las Vegas recordings. Today, we'll go over Health Ranger's claims. The biggest problem is that Health Ranger shows no evidence for his assertion. He simply proclaims it.
Because the forensic acoustic analysis of the audio file shows that there are two shooters. Two shooters, yes, two shooters. Shooter number one has a lag time in the audio file of about 0.559 seconds. But we also have another shooter that shows up in this acoustic analysis. Shooter number two has a lag time of 0.374 seconds.
That's it. He never shows any actual waveforms to back up this specific claim. He plays back sharp sounds followed by rifle reports. But no actual audio of what is specifically claimed here, two different lag times. All we get is drawings on the board. We need to see the data, the exact recording and the exact timestamps that support his claim. Making claims without data is not how science works. As far as his claim, the fundamental error Health Ranger makes is mistaking supersonic cracks for bullet hits. Because of this error, his theory falls apart, as it relies on the sharp sounds being bullet hits. This is not the case. We will approach this from two angles: possible sound combinations, and evidence from video. Note that in what follows, we're discussing sharp sounds only, not low-frequency muzzle bangs, which are a separate subject. Let's start with possible combinations of sharp sounds. Case number 1. You can hear supersonic cracks without hearing any bullet hits. As we've explained, you hear the supersonic crack anytime you are within 100 to 150 feet from the bullet path, even if the bullets land nowhere near you. You can even aim upwards to maximize the distance. You will still hear the crack, even though the bullet may land more than a mile away, depending on the weapon. In the following clip, we hear the supersonic crack of bullets flying overhead and landing very far away. No bullet hits are heard. Again, ignore the muzzle bang thuds, which are separate sounds. Now we'll hear a bullet hitting snow, then passing by the microphone and landing far away, then hitting a metal target. You'll hear the supersonic crack in all cases. You'll hear the bullet impact only when the bullet hits the target. Again, ignore the delayed muzzle bangs. We'll now be in the same scene, but facing the barrel, several hundred yards away. The bullets will pass by, and land far away, with no audible bullet hits. The supersonic cracks will be virtually identical to the sharp sounds in Las Vegas recordings. Let's examine case 2. Can there be bullet hits without supersonic cracks? No, because the sonic shockwave is generated alongside the entire bullet path. The only way to block the supersonic crack would be to separate the bullet path from the listener with a large obstacle. In summary, you can hear supersonic cracks without hearing bullet hits, but you can't hear bullet hits without hearing supersonic cracks. Since there's only one type of sharp sound in most Las Vegas recordings, what we hear are supersonic cracks. If these sharp sounds were bullet hits, then what happened to the supersonic cracks? You can't just take them out of the picture. As Health Ranger himself says, the bullets in the recordings travel faster than sound.
And at these distances that we're talking about, which is typically, less than 600 yards, the bullets remain supersonic, so they never get slower than the speed of sound.
The fact that we're hearing supersonic cracks, not bullet hits, is apparent from what we see in the video. Here we see people closely huddled together, with almost no space in between. Any bullets arriving nearby would be hitting people, not the ground, and we'd be witnessing a bloodbath. We don't see it. Trying to claim that these are bullet impacts but they come from further away, and thus not harming people seen here, doesn't work. If the hits are far away, then we must account for the time the sound takes to travel from the impact to this phone. Since we don't know where the impact is, we don't know that time, and we can't use the sharp sound to compute the distance to the shooter. Another question: how do you get sharp sounds from bullets hitting AstroTurf? Or any sounds at all? Curiously, theories which mistake the supersonic cracks for other sounds contradict each other. Some, following Health Ranger, say that these sharp sounds are bullet impacts. Others claim this is gunfire from a second shooter. So which one is it, bullet hits or gunfire from the second shooter? Health Ranger proposes shooter locations that meet his criteria: Oasis Apartments, Dirt Mound, and AMPM. We can check if these locations are plausible. Here's how. Any sound traveling to a recording device leaves an imprint, namely its travel time from the source. With multiple recordings, the sound travel times must reflect their relative distances to the source. Here's an analogy. Imagine a human handprint. Its finger lengths, measured from the base, are in correct proportions, defined by the bones. Now imagine you see the 5 fingertip points of an invisible handprint. If someone claims to know where the base of the invisible handprint is, you can test his claim by checking if the proportions of the proposed handprint match the human hand. If the base location is correct, the handprint will match the human hand. If the base location is wrong, the handprint will be distorted. Testing possible location of a sound source is similar, except the proportions are set by the distances to recording devices and the speed of sound. For the shooting in Las Vegas, we can compare sound travel discrepancies for the 32nd floor, and other proposed shooter locations. Besides the ones suggested by Health Ranger, we can include 2 often mentioned places: the top of the Skyview Pillar, and the roof of the monorail at Mandalay Bay. These are the discrepancies for the 32nd floor, already shown in Part 2. These are for the northwestern building of the Oasis Apartments, suggested by Health Ranger. By the way, it's hard to imagine how anyone could shoot bump fire rounds from the roof of this building, without alerting the tenants, and having it reported to the cops. These are for the dirt mound nearby. For the AMPM store. For the top of the northern pillar. And for the monorail roof. Here's a summary, which ranks the scale of discrepancies for all locations, from the smallest to the largest. The 32nd floor is the best match for the sound travel times we observe in the cell phone recordings. The AMPM store is the worst one. This chart underscores what has already been shown previously. The best match between sound travel times in the cell phone recordings are locations on these hyperbolic curves, which converge on the 32nd floor. The further you get from these curves, the less likely the proposed location. Going back to the handprint analogy, if you say the shots do not come from the 32nd floor, you need to explain why the audio handprint you propose is more distorted than the one for the 32nd floor. Health Ranger keeps referring to an imaginary ground zero point, which he drew on the whiteboard and from which he measures distances, as if the shooter aimed at some specific location, conveniently filmed by a cell phone. This is not the case. The bullets were sprayed all over the place. Cell phone recordings took place in random locations, far away from each other, with no relationship to bullet hits at all. Every location must be tied to a specific recording and a timestamp, with the sounds in each video judged individually. As you can see, the distances between the major cell phone locations are huge. Not just between locations, but even between one phone over time. The concept of a ground zero point, where bullets just happen to land, is meaningless. Health Ranger keeps using the phrase bullets arrive. Arrive where? He seems to make a constant false assumption that bullets are somehow destined to arrive at a particular filming location. It's not true. The bullets fly overhead, off to the left and right, and may land very far away. They don't arrive at the cell phone locations at all, except in very rare cases. Let's illustrate the low probability of a camera recording the sound of a bullet impact. First, let's find out the distance from which a sound related to a bullet impact would be audible, given the noise level of commotion and gunfire. Let's look at the case where we have a visible bullet impact, and a sound which is not a supersonic crack. It's the soda cup hit by a bullet. Listen to the pang following the impact. We don't know what this sound is. But it could plausibly be the ricochet. If that's the case, it would be an extremely rare case where a sound can be linked to a visible bullet impact. From 3D reconstruction, We can get the distance from the cell phone to the cup, which is about 35 feet. We can round it up to 40 feet, and use it as the approximate distance within which a typical pavement hit can be heard. Let's now demonstrate the low probability of a camera recording the sound of a bullet impact. This is the top view of the venue with 20,000 points representing people, with density roughly as seen during the event. We will color blue all people who can hear the muzzle bangs, which is everyone. Let's now randomly choose a point of bullet impact. Then color green all people who can hear the supersonic crack, that is everyone who is within the 100 to 150 feet wide cylinder described previously. In yellow, we'll mark the 40 feet wide circle, within which an impact may be heard. Now, let's randomly select cell phone locations. We estimate the number from existing, high-quality recordings shot inside the venue. We exclude all recordings from outside, because they're unlikely to have picked up the sound of an impact. We thus exclude the cabbie video, the roof lounge, other hotels, Raymond Page, etc. Also, we exclude all recordings shot too early or too late for the shooting, too short, or too chaotic to be meaningful. There are about 10 major recordings left that fulfill these criteria. So we randomly select 10 cell phone locations. We're now going to randomly change cell phone locations, to show how unlikely it is for a random cell phone to be within the yellow circle where a bullet impact can be heard. This gives us a rough picture of what to expect in terms of probability. For a single random bullet path, about half of the cameras in the venue should pick up the supersonic crack, while recording a bullet hit should be extremely rare. This is what we observe. Even though the situation is more complex, because the bullet path moves randomly within one gunfire burst. By the way, this is how these regions look like with a moving bullet path. Note how the supersonic crack cylinder intersecting with the ground creates an ellipse, resembling a spotlight. Health Ranger never shows the actual waveforms of what he claims are different lag times. We don't know if his claim is based on a single, or multiple gunfire bursts. Different bursts can come from different weapons and different cartridges, which makes claims relying on one common muzzled velocity baseless. Even for one cartridge, muzzled velocity differs, depending on type, grain, twist, barrel length, etc. Only FBI or police labs can link specific weapons and cartridges to specific volleys. Only then lag time analysis will be possible. This concludes Part 3.